I'd like to welcome all of you. My name is Wolfgang Reinicke. I'm the Dean of the New School of Public Policy here at the CEU in Budapest. I'd also like to welcome those that have joined us via live stream channel. Welcome to you as well. I don't know how much you know about this new school, so I want to take the next few minutes before also happily answering questions to tell you a little bit about what we do at the Public Policy School, why we think we differ from other departments here at CEU, but why I think we also actually differ from other public policy schools around the world. Want to learn a little bit more about you, where you come from, what your interests are, describe to you our curriculum, tell you a little bit about the kinds of students that we are looking for, and then hopefully have some time left, show you a small video to give you a sense and flavor of what the school does, and then hopefully have some time to answer some questions. Just for me to get a feel of what your background is, can you tell me how many of you come from Budapest? Most of you? Okay. How many of you are Hungarian? Almost most of you, not entirely. Great. How many of you have a background in the broader realm, let's say, of public policy, but also political science, international relations, economics? Okay. The others, in what kind of background do you have? Can some of you speak up? Can you tell me? Arts, science, history, psychology, engineering, medicine? Journalism? Okay, excellent. We basically look for students from all kinds of backgrounds. In fact, I would argue that the more non-traditional disciplines we have at the school, such as journalism, but even engineers or doctors, we teach courses on global health, the more interesting it is, because if you're brought up in a different discipline, if you think like a doctor or like a mathematician or an engineer, I'm sure you look at a particular public policy problem in a very different way, and you therefore can bring a lot of interesting perspectives to the classroom. To say it's slightly different, the Public Policy School is a uniquely global school in the sense our inaugural class, we just opened our doors, has 26 students. We hope to double the cohort next year, and those 26 students are from 21 different countries, which makes it a uniquely, if you will, intercultural experience. And when we discuss many, sometimes difficult issues, such as human rights, poverty, religion and public policy, conflict, students bring very different perspectives into the classroom. And in some cases, they're actually students that not too long ago, their home countries were involved in a conflict. And so it enriches the classroom. As I will say also later, many of our students have some professional experience. And if I could just take another mini survey among you, who of you, in whatever form, has volunteered or has taken an internship or even has been involved in a professional job? Okay, also quite a number. Even if it's just something small, voluntary, because it often helps. It's not a must, but it often helps if you, as a student, can bring some professional experience into the classroom, because again, a lot of peer-to-peer learning is very helpful, and this is what I always encourage, you can also challenge our faculty. I know I'm live, but nevertheless I say that because often what we learn in textbooks today, it's very difficult to replicate the complexity and the dynamism and the rapid change that the world is currently undergoing, as you all know, and we try to educate students that are really prepared for the kind of world that they're going to face out there. We're not necessarily or rarely training future academics. The school eventually will develop a PhD program in a few years, but primarily our goal is to train professionals that after their 2 years go out into the real world. And if I were to summarize it in a nutshell, in many ways we are a business school for the public and nonprofit sectors. We want to train professionals that can work and create results and have impact in the public sector, meaning governments, local governments, national governments, regional governments, in international organizations, as far as the public sector is concerned, as well as civil society, and by that I mean primarily NGOs, national NGOs, international NGOs, but also foundations, activist groups, you name it. Some of you may also end up in the private sector. Increasingly, as you know, corporations need to engage with governments, often in developing countries, even more so because governments are very weak. Corporations actually get often involved in social issues in their own community. They, of course, have a strong interest because they want to have a vibrant, active, educated workforce. So often, if depending on where you work, what kind of corporation you work, you may find up yourself doing less a typical MBA kind of work and much more typical kind of public policy work. Let me tell you just briefly how our curriculum is composed. And I should say that this curriculum was designed based on getting feedback from other public policy schools. We're in a unique situation that we're creating something new. So of course, if you create something new, one thing to do is ask for those that have done it already, what would you do differently if you could do it over again? So I talked to a lot of other deans and professors at public policy schools, but I also talked to students and asked them, you know, how did you like it? What would you have liked to see different? And I talked to future employers and asked them, what kind of graduates from public policy schools would you like to see? I went to foundations, I went to governments, I talked to the World Bank, to the UN, and so on and so forth. And the curriculum is a direct product of this. Not the first element, our traditional academic coursework, which you can look it up on the website. I won't repeat the obvious. It, of course, has core courses, traditional economics, methods, ethics, a course on governance, international law, the traditional core curriculum that almost any public policy school has to offer. It's very interdisciplinary designed. We have a fantastic course called The Evolution of Modern Governance, which is taught by 3 different faculty, a sociologist, a political economist coming in, and a person that works on international relations and global governance, and they bring you the perspective on governance and the evolution of governance from 3 different disciplines. How does it look from a sociology perspective, social movements, where does civil society come from? How does it look from a political economy perspective? How does it look the relationship between the market as one form of social organizations that dominates most of the countries in the world, even in China now, and states, which is the other major form, how we as societies organize ourselves, sometimes in democracies, sometimes unfortunately not so democratic regimes, how did they evolve through time? And so our students learn this from different perspectives, and then of course the international relations, global governance person looks at it from, because of globalization, what are the core issues of governing the global economy in today's age, whether it relates to financial markets, but also other issues such as human trafficking, epidemics, environmental governance, and so on and so forth. And in addition to this core curriculum, we have a whole range of electives. Again, you can look those up, and you can specialize in different areas. These specializations, because the student body is still relatively small, are somewhat broad still. One is called Media and Communication Studies. Then we have one called Regional and Global Governance, and then we have one called Human Security and Development. As the years go on in the school, those specializations will be further refined because hopefully we have a lot more students and we can create, refine these specialties more important. Now, the 2 next things that I'm going to talk about are the things that we developed new as a result of these exit interviews, these benchmark studies that we did. And on the one that I'm going to talk about, I also show you a video in just a minute. The second one is what we call the Skills for Impact curriculum. When we did those surveys, both the students said to us on the first day, of my job, my boss came to me and said, can you do a budget for me? Or he came and said, can you write me a 2-page policy paper? Here's a 60-page paper. I need to have it condensed right now, within the next 2 hours, and I need to have a policy brief. Can you do a project outline for me? How do you, develop a whole project outline from beginning to the end? Can you draft for me an advocacy campaign? Can you negotiate something? This is what the students said to us, and they said we couldn't, because most of the degrees we weren't that trained. And most of the employers told us the same thing. I got all these wonderful, great graduates, but when I asked them to do a relatively simple task, I never learned that. When I went to school, they couldn't do it, and they had to learn it. So we developed the Skills for Impact curriculum, which again, you can look it up on the website. Throughout the 2-year process, in very intense 1 or 2 or 3-day modules, teaches you on how to do a budget, on how to do fundraising, on how to do advocacy, on what leadership means in the 21st century, in how to work in teams, how to negotiate, how to speak in public in front of the camera or an audience, and how to do policy writing, and how to do crisis management. And I probably forgot some. Again, you can look this up. And this we call the Skills for Impact curriculum. You get a certificate at the end of the day, and when you go for your first job interview, you can say, I have done these things. Now, fair enough, you maybe haven't drilled very deeply into each of these, but they give you the skills to educate yourself through online courses and books and reading and writing to actually learn a lot more about it. But I'm pretty sure that you have the basics down. That's the first part. The second part that we did is we asked ourselves, one of the students, and that's where the name Passion Project comes from, one student said to us in exit and said, it was a great program, we had courses, but there's one thing, instead of just having back-to-back lectures and courses, that we wish we would have had some time that we could have done something that we are passionate about. Do really something that I want to do, not constantly have lectures. So we thought about it for a while and we decided to not require a thesis in our 2-year master program. You can do one if you want, you get credits for it, but we don't require it. Instead, we do require, and it's mandatory, the Passion Project. What is the Passion Project? We identify with you together a host organization, a real world organization, such as Transparency International, the World Bank, the Department for International Development in the UK, the German Development Agency, Global Witness, Human Rights Watch, you name it, and they will give to the school or to this team of students a real-world project that they need to be resolved. We create teams in the school, and over the next 2 years of your entire degree, you actually develop a response to this policy challenge that they have, whatever it may be. And after the 2 years, with of course interactions in between, you will report back to the organization. Why do we do this? Because we feel in the context of the Passion Project, you can apply in a real-world context both the academic knowledge that you acquired in your core courses and in your elective, as well as the skills. Because the first thing you're going to have to do is you're going to have to do budget. The second thing you're going to have to do, actually the first thing you have to do, you have to negotiate with that organization, because the organization will give you something very broadly. Can you help us in this and this? So you need to engage with that organization, actually negotiating the precise nature of the project and design it. Also from a method, what kind of methods do you design and analytically conceptualize the project? Then you need to develop a budget, okay? Then you need to think about an advocacy campaign. Ultimately, at the end of the day, you need to do a public presentation to your client. In between, in a teamwork, most likely in a multicultural team, you need to learn how to do teamwork. You need to engage in leadership, what we would define in leadership in the 21st century, being able to work in teams. And maybe even in your team, you have to negotiate. So we try to contextualize the skills that you learn in the Skills for Impact problem, plus the academic curriculum that you get in the context of a real project, to try to prepare you as close as we can for the kind of world that you're going to face out there. So in many ways, the Passion Project is the platform, the context within which the knowledge and the skills that we provide for you gets acted out in a real context, but you're still in a safe environment because you have faculty, at least one, if not more faculty members that do that with you. They mentor you, they protect you, they help you, they lead you through, okay? And therefore you can make mistakes. We all make mistakes, it's perfectly fine. You resurrect them, you change it, you adjust, and so on and so forth. So then, as I said, I'm repeating myself, when you go out on your first day on the real job, hopefully many of the things will be familiar to you. You would have already been through many of these processes. You have worked in teams, and you know how hard it is to work with an organization, and some of the organizational difficulties when you have a real client, and it's not completely new to you. Okay? Let me stop here for a moment. We're going to actually show you a short video from the first session of our Skills for Impact curriculum, which 2 former McKinsey people are teaching this, and they basically taught the introductory course on leadership. It was a 2-day session.
You're supposed to get input from your classmates. The idea of the session is really to increase what I would call your leadership literacy.
The true leader is able to listen to a future that wants to emerge.
We want our students to think of leadership rather as a practice, practicing leadership rather than becoming a leader. Even in a team setting where we're all on equal footing, our students can assume leadership in the moment and help the group move along.
In our Skills for Impact program, we really offer a toolbox of skills.
I'm going to give all of you 3 blue dots, and I want you to pick the 3 definitions that you find the most relevant.
Leadership is a lot about listening, about asking good questions, about drawing others in so that they can really come to their full potential and contribute what they have to offer.
Around the most effective leaders, followers become leaders in their own right.
Leadership includes managing others, working in teams. Most of the work we do today in the 21st century happens in teams. Our students need to learn how to do that very effectively. Leadership is very close to manipulation, which we talk with our students about. It's not what we want. Leadership always has to be tied to values, to morals, and to ethics. And that's why it's really important to also have an ethics class at the School of Public Policy.
It is about taking initiative, right? It is about driving change. It is about making people do things in a good way, in a positive way.
We are helping our students to explore their purpose based on the values that really drive them.
Skills for Impact program, that means for our students learning to be better negotiators, improving their policy writing, becoming better communicators, learning to plan advocacy campaigns for their goals, also reflecting on themselves and who they are and where they want to be in life and where they want to go.
I see myself in the next 5 years maybe working in an international non-governmental organization.
I would like to be working in the mining sector.
International organization on human security and development.
I'll be working for a think tank.
Hopefully, I will join the executive branch back home in the Turkish government.
I'm thinking about working in government.
Looking forward to work with the international organization in the area of peace, security and conflict resolution in the coming 5 years.
Very few policy schools around the world actually offer skills trainings to their students. This is something that makes the School of Public Policy here in Budapest a really unique place.
The mission of the School of Public Policy is purpose beyond power. We want our students to lead from a place of real purpose without using coercive power.
In our first workshop in the Skills for Impact program, a student shared his definition of leadership. He said, leadership is changing things for the betterment of humanity. And I really like that definition.
So this gives you a bit of a sense of what the Skills for Impact curriculum is about. The Passion Project, you know, when we developed it, we took quite some big risks, because you obviously rely on finding those host organizations, and you don't know. And I can tell you with you know, great pride that the team, and I should also say that we work very much as a team, both faculty and administrative staff of the school. We have been able to actually you know, already assemble quite a number of passion projects, more than we need for this year. And I believe the students will, I think they will find out today about the kinds of organizations that we have assembled and the kinds of projects, and then they can actually choose. We have quite a bit more than there this year. There are 8 passion projects, because we usually assemble 3 students in a team. And so they have a wider choice of projects to choose from. And then over the next week, we'll, you know, organize the groups and get the teams together. And then they're off running, if not still before Christmas, certainly full speed after Christmas. And then do this over the next year and a half. It may involve some travel. It may involve some other things. And if you go back to our website, I would hope that within the next 2 or 3 weeks, you will actually see them publicly being presented, what they are and who our partners who our partners are in the context of the Passion Project. Of course, and I shouldn't say, you know, a hidden motive. I can say this easily, and you can imagine this, that my hope, of course, is that some of those organizations that are our partners in Passion Project are also potential future employers, because they get to know you, they get to value your work. If the team does good work, that hopefully my expectation is that, you know, when the Passion Project is done, one of the other organizations say, maybe you or you actually would like to stay on. Incidentally, we also have, I forgot to say this, in addition to this 3-legged curriculum, we also have a mandatory internship, almost mandatory internship, depending a little bit on your professional experience. But many of our students will also do internships that could be aligned thematically with the Passion Project, but it doesn't have to be. So if your Passion Project is something, let's say, on the resource course, we're also doing I'm not even probably allowed to say this publicly, because it's not known yet, but you may decide to do an internship in that broader field, or you may decide, I would like to explore maybe something in global health to make sure that actually I don't want to do this, but I would like to find out and get more experience. You do an internship in another field. Let me switch to the other side, or let me turn the coin and back to you. We are accepting, of course, applications, as you know. The deadline is on January 23rd, 2014. And let me give you a little bit of the kinds of things that we would like to see in our students, so you get a sense of who we are looking for. Obviously, you should have shown a strong academic background. You should be at least proficient in English. As you know, CEU has a strong academic writing department, and all the students that come here in the first year, in parallel to the traditional curriculum, have to go on certain tests, and there are writing courses, and we will support you. We ourselves in the Skills for Impact have a specific policy writing course that's being taught by one of our own professors, Bob Temper. He is a professor of practice, and we recruited him from the International Crisis Group, where he led the Asia operations for 12 years. He has nothing but written policy reports for the last 12 years, so he's perfect to teach you that. But you do need to be proficient in English. Obviously have a high aptitude and passion for learning. Bring also a strong passion for the public sector and the public good. This is really important. When I talk longer about the School for Public Policy, the reason why I decided to do this job is because as much as important the private sector and the market, as I said earlier, is, so is the public sector in its all variations. And I think currently the public sector is actually very, very weak. And we need good people to staff the public sector, whether it's nationally, locally, or globally. And this is what the school is all about. We need to rebalance. I think there's a disequilibrium between the public and the private, especially at the global level, where there are very few real global governance institutions around. Most of the institutions that we have were formed at a time after World War II for a world that no longer exists. So we need to reform, we need to innovate the global public sector, if you will. And I would hope that we can be able to educate those students that one day will do this in leadership capacities. And this brings me to the third criteria. We do look for students that have the potential to become leaders. This kind of leader that you just saw about, being able to work in teams, being able to create new leaders after them, doing a self-analysis of yourself, reflecting upon yourself as a leader, and constantly being willing to adjust and adapt. In today's world, if you want to be a leader, you have to be able to also recognize failure and your own mistakes and adapt, because most likely you will make failures. Trust me, in public policy, and you have to learn on how to deal with this, and you have to constantly adjust and adapt. So the notion of leadership in the 21st century, in my view, is a very different one than what we know. Hierarchies matter very little in this day and age. Obviously, an interest in global policy issues. And by that I mean, by the way, very strongly, not just abstract global stuff. Every global policy issue ultimately has to first be legitimized at the local level, and then enforced again at the local level, and create legitimacy and supervise. So whether it's global health issues or environmental issues or human rights issues, they may be negotiated at the global level, but for them to succeed, they need to be rooted in local politics. So when I say global policy issues, that certainly also involves national and even local politics and understanding of local communities. And again, this is reflected in our curriculum. And the last point I already mentioned, a desire to serve others in the public sector and be really passionate about it and feel proud about that. That's very important. There's a little bit of a problem with many public policy schools. If you look at the exit survey data, unfortunately, many of the graduates end up in the private sector. And I think that's a tide that we have to try and change a little bit. I myself have spent some time in the private sector. I think it's good for all of you to at some point work in the private sector, to be able to understand their language, to be able to understand their interests and desires and needs and incentives and what drives the private sector, because ultimately you will be sitting at the negotiating table with somebody from the private sector, let's assume you work in government, and with somebody from civil society, all in a multicultural global context, if you talk about the issues that we are trying to resolve as global policy leaders. So it's good when you understand the other side. You know what motivates or drives him when you have to negotiate. It's very, very important. What are the interests and the incentives of others? So it always pays off to at some point work in the private sector. But we, of course, hope that ultimately you return to the public sector and spend most of your time in their career. So then thank you all for coming, and I look forward to hearing from you. Thank you very much.